ready to go deep. This time, we're taking a deep dive into Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. But, and here's the thing, we're not just talking about warp drives and phasers.
Right.
We're talking about a show that premiered when the world was changing fast.
Yeah.
And it wasn't afraid to get real, even with all the spaceships and aliens.
What's amazing is DS9 didn't just, capture that feeling of change,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It actually helped shape how stories were told on TV, even the ones we watch today.
Okay, so rewind to 1993 for a second. The Cold War is over, the internet's just starting to become, a thing.
Mhm.
And TV shows are realizing they can tell these longer, more intricate stories, like Twin Peaks, Babylon 5. They'd already started, right? But DS9...
Took it up a notch.
Totally.
Yeah.
Especially for Star Trek.
And that's key here.
Mm-hmm.
Because you think about the Star Trek shows that came before DS9, they were mostly episodic.
Right.
You jump into any episode
Right.
and pretty much follow along. But DS9 said, nope, we're doing things differently.
It was like Star Trek was suddenly playing a game with, way higher stakes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that space station setting, that played a big part in it because it wasn't a starship boldly going right.
Right.
It was a community, like a crossroads.
Mm.
And you can't just wrap up those conflicts in a neat 45-minute package.
Mm.
Have you ever, gotten hooked on a show like Game of Thrones?
Oh, yeah.
Where you just had to know what happened next? That's what DS9 was doing way before it became, what everyone was doing.
It's funny because that whole, space station thing always seemed kind of limiting to me at first. Shouldn't Star Trek be about exploration, right? Right.
Seeking out new life and new civilizations.
Sure.
But then you realize the station itself, it becomes this whole microcosm of the galaxy.
Exactly. And that's what allowed for so much depth. The characters couldn't just, beam away from their problems.
Right, right.
They had to live with the consequences, week after week, season after season. Relationships evolved, alliances shifted, and that line between good and evil got really, really blurry.
And that kind of leads us to another thing DS9 was not afraid of. Going dark. I mean, this was Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
Known for being optimistic, showing us this hopeful future.
Mm-hmm.
But DS9, it was like, hold on, let's look at the shadows of that future too. It was a bold move. And it really resonated with viewers, Think about the siege of AR-558. That episode wasn't just about phaser fights and space battles. It was about the trauma of war.
Right.
The way it sticks with you.
Yeah.
That was almost unheard of in science fiction at the time.
I remember watching that episode for the first time, and I was like, wow, they're really going there. It was brutal, but it felt real. And it made the characters, even the ones who weren't, on the front lines,
Right.
so much more relatable.
And that's the thing about DS9. It didn't shy away from those difficult questions. It tackled war, religion, politics, prejudice.
It's like they were holding up a mirror to society, even as they were entertaining us with spaceships and aliens, right? And speaking of reflecting society, let's talk about representation, because DS9, they really broke ground there too. I mean, Avery Brooks as Captain Sisko, a black man leading a Star Trek series.
Yeah.
That was huge.
Huge doesn't even begin to describe it. This wasn't just, checking a box for diversity. Sisko's identity, his experiences as a black man, they were woven into the DNA of that show.
Yeah, it wasn't just, oh, look, a black captain. It was about the way his heritage, it informed everything, his leadership, his relationships.
Even little things.
Right, like the jazz playing in his quarters. It just felt so real.
That authenticity, it was crucial, especially back then. I mean, seeing that kind of representation, that nuance in a mainstream sci-fi show, forget about it.
Yeah.
It was challenging viewers.
Yeah.
To confront their own biases, see the world through a different lens.
And DS9 didn't stop there. They introduced a recurring gay character.
Right.
And not just for a token episode or something.
Oh, no.
He was part of the community. And his relationship, it felt as real and complex as any other on the show.
Absolutely. It wasn't about, let's check off some boxes.
Yeah.
It was about reflecting the real world, all its complexity.
All its diversity.
And by doing it, DS9, it really helped pave the way for greater inclusivity.
Yeah.
In science fiction, in television, across the board. It's hard to imagine, Discovery or Picard,
Yeah.
with their diverse casts and storylines.
Yeah.
Without DS9 taking those first steps, boldly going there.
It's like DS9 planted a seed, and now we're seeing those fruits, all these incredible shows that are pushing boundaries and making us think.
That's the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
DS9, it showed us that science fiction, good science fiction, it's not about escaping reality.
Right.
It's about using those fantastical elements.
So hold up a mirror.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To our own world, to ourselves.
So we've talked about the setting, the serialized storytelling, the dark themes, the representation. It's pretty clear DS9 was a game changer, right?
It was.
But what about its legacy? How do you think it's impacted television, especially within science fiction in the years since it ended?
I think its influence is everywhere.
Yeah.
Look at the shows that everyone's talking about, the ones we can't stop watching, the ones that keep us guessing.
Yeah.
They've got these complex characters wrestling with moral dilemmas,
Yeah.
intricate plots that unfold over multiple episodes.
Right.
And they're not afraid to go to some pretty dark places.
Shows like Battlestar Galactica or The Expanse, right, with those morally gray areas and that gritty feel.
Yes. DS9, it proved that audiences were ready for that. They wanted stories that challenged them, that didn't shy away from the messiness of life.
Even if it was life on a space station.
Exactly.
And it's not just those big epic space operas either. Even the newer Star Trek shows like Picard, Discovery,
Yeah.
they feel like they're direct descendants of DS9 in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. The serialized storytelling, that focus on character, the willingness to go there, to explore those darker parts of the Star Trek universe, that was DS9.
It's like DS9 broke down the door,
Yeah.
and now look at all these shows. They're walking right through that door, building on what it started. So DS9 wasn't just a good show, it was a turning point. It's funny how we use that phrase, ahead of its time. But with DS9, it's like, yeah, they really were.
Right. Imagine if it had premiered on streaming,
Oh, totally.
with the freedom to tell that whole story, all those seasons, right from the start. People would be calling it revolutionary, which, I mean,
It was.
it really was in a lot of ways.
And it's finding this whole new audience now through streaming, too. Like, proof that its themes, they still resonate.
Maybe even more so now.
Right.
That search for identity, a world on the brink, I mean, those are timeless, right?
Totally.
But DS9, it found a way to explore them with such depth.
It makes you wonder, what would DS9 tackle if it were on the air today? Like, what current events, What would they be bold enough to explore?
Wow. That's a big question. But I think part of what made DS9 so good, so smart, was its ability to tap into those core human experiences. It wasn't just about the issues of its day, but those universal struggles we all face in any time. So, in a way, it's still relevant. It's still speaking to us.
Like, we're still having the same conversations that started.
Exactly. And isn't that like the mark of truly great storytelling?
For sure.
It stays with you, makes you think.
It makes you want to keep exploring.
Yes.
Well, I know I'm due for a rewatch after all this.
Me too. There's something so rewarding about revisiting a show like that, seeing how those themes, they've only become more relevant.
Totally agree. And who knows, maybe somewhere out there on some distant space station, a new story is being told.
Ooh.
One that, owes a debt to DS9, one that boldly goes where no show has gone before.
Here's hoping, right?
Yeah.
Because we can always use more stories that challenge us,
Yeah.
inspire us.
Well said. Until next time, keep exploring those deep cuts, everybody. And remember, the universe of great storytelling is vast.